Part 23, Breath on the Summit. Chapter 1, The Final Threshold. The upward climb had reached its final, jagged edge. For hours, perhaps for a lifetime, the ascent had been the only reality Alara knew. Now, as her boots found purchase on the flat table of granite that formed the summit, the vertical struggle ceased. She stepped across the rim, her lungs burning with the thin, crystalline air of the high peaks, and stood to gaze upon the world beneath a brilliant, unblinking noon sun. Beneath her lay a landscape of unforgiving ledges and narrow switchbacks, a physical map of the effort she had expended. In the blazing clarity of the day, those rocks reflected back the truth of all her days. Every slip, every moment of doubt, and every surge of adrenaline was etched into the sun-bleached terrain. Alara realized then that the mountain was not an obstacle to be conquered, but a mirror. It showed her the woman she was, solitary, resilient, and possessed by a singular, quiet focus. Chapter 2, The Echo of the Trumpet. As if to mark the moment, the wind carried a sound that seemed to cut through the heat, a solo trumpet, clear and bold. It was a single, powerful note that vibrated within her very marrow, competing with the roar of the wind. It wasn't a melody of sorrow, but a triumphant declaration of existence under the wide, blue canopy of the sky. It was a quiet victory, one that she walked alone, fulfilling the greatest promise she had ever written to herself, the promise to see the world from the top, no matter the cost. The vista stretched out in an infinite tapestry of light. Far below, the mighty river that had roared beside the trailhead was reduced to a tiny silver thread, flashing like a blade in the sunlight as it wove through the dark velvet of the forest. The valley was a distant memory, a place of noise and complication. This was the final solace of her retreat, a place where the books she had read and the memories she carried finally made sense. Everything was small from this height, even her own fears. Chapter 3, The Solar Kingdom. The trumpet held that singular note, letting it hang in the air before allowing it to fall away into the vastness. It was a simple sound, yet it reached toward the azure sky like a bridge. This was the final answer to the mountain's ancient call. In this perfect moment, where the eagles circled on thermals, rising higher on the midday heat, Alara was no longer a climber. She was part of the summit itself. Above the clouds, which drifted like white islands in a sea of sapphire, she felt the rhythmic pulse of the earth within her. Cheth, the internal battle, the one against the persistent whisper of fatigue, was finally laid to rest. The granite peaks surrounding her looked like frozen waves of stone. They were bathed in a light so intense it seemed to vibrate, a kingdom of silence that she claimed as her own. It was a story the sun had told for eons, but one that she was finally hearing in its entirety. Chapter 4, Reflections in the Noonlight. She thought of every valley she had left behind. Alara remembered the tangled woods where the light struggled to touch the ground. Those were the places of heavy burdens, where the restless mind is kept from the sight of the horizon. Each step up this mountain had been carved in sweat and bitter cold, a physical rebellion against the gravity that constantly sought to pull her back to the familiar lowlands. The air she breathed was sharp, tasting of heat on stone and ancient ice, hidden in the shadows of the north face. It felt as though it were cleansing every hidden chamber of her soul. The summit had been a heavy, taxing price, demanding everything her muscles and mind could give. But it was worth the wait. Standing there, she felt a sense of wholeness that the shaded valleys could never provide. Chapter 5, The Architecture of the Day. The atmospheric shift above the summit was a change in the very structure of the universe. From this height, Alara could see the curvature of the earth's limb, a soft arc that defined the boundary between the breathable and the infinite. The clouds below were an undulating ocean of white foam, casting sharp, moving shadows over the valleys that looked like dark leviathans swimming through the forest. She thought of the river-flowing hill music that had played in her mind, a mental symphony she had composed to match the rhythm of her heartbeat. Each movement of the climb had a corresponding cadence. The lower forests were woodwinds and cellos, rich with the scent of damp earth. The mid-level ridges were percussion and brass, sharp and demanding. But here, the music had transitioned into an ethereal choral arrangement, high and sustained, mirroring the brilliance of the sun. Chapter 6, The Alchemist's Fire. The sun sat at its zenith, the light so pure it seemed to scrub the world clean. The peaks to the east didn't just reflect the light, they seemed to sparkle with a crystalline fire. Elara reached out and touched the rock beside her. It was warm now, heated by the direct rays of the sun, and it felt like a living thing beneath her palm. This was the alchemy of the day, the transformation of base struggle into the gold of clarity. She thought of the people she had left behind, those who preferred the safety of the plains. They saw the mountain as a danger. They could not understand that the danger was the point. Without the risk of the fall, the standing would have no meaning. The solo trumpet note she heard earlier was the vibration of a soul that had successfully negotiated its own survival. Chapter 7. The Geometry of Silence. Silence on the summit was not an absence of sound, but a presence of its own. It was a dense, heavy thing that sat upon the landscape, even under the bright sun. When Elara moved her arm, the rustle of her jacket sounded like a landslide. This silence forced her to confront her own interiority. She began to map out the next phase of her life. The climb had taught her that the hardest part was not the steepest grade, but the psychological plateau where the goal is visible, but still hours away. She would carry this lesson back to the Riverlands. She would be Elara, the woman who had stood where the eagles fly, and that knowledge would be an invisible armor. The descent would be a journey of unlearning, shedding the absolute simplicity of the peak to re-enter the complexity of the world. Chapter 8. The Weight of Memory. Elara remained perched on the granite throne, her eyes tracing the jagged silhouettes of the range. She remembered a time when the weight of expectation felt heavier than the pack currently resting against her spine. Down in the cities, she had felt herself fracturing, becoming a person composed entirely of other people's needs. The mountain had demanded a different kind of fragmentation. It stripped away the superficial, leaving only the essential: muscle, breath, and will. She recalled the third day of the trek, when a sudden storm had pinned her against a vertical face of shale. In that moment of terror, the name Elara had meant nothing. She was simply a biological entity fighting to persist. That realization was a liberation. If she could survive when her name was gone, then she could survive anything when her identity returned. Chapter 9. The Noon Witness. The sun continued its steady path, illuminating every crack and crevice of the mountain. Elara stood up, her shadow a small, dark pool beneath her feet. She felt a profound sense of gratitude toward the mountain. It had been a harsh teacher, but a fair one. She checked her gear one last time, tightening the straps of her pack. The descent would be treacherous in its own way. Gravity, which she had fought so hard to overcome, would now become a dangerous ally. But as she took her first step away from the absolute peak, she didn't feel like she was leaving. She felt like she was carrying the summit with her. The river-flowing hill wasn't just a place. It was the trajectory of her own spirit, rising from the water and stone to touch the center of the day. She checked her gear one last time, tightening the straps of her pack. The descent would be treacherous in its own way. Gravity, which she had fought so hard to overcome, would now become a dangerous ally. But as she took her first step away from the absolute peak, she didn't feel like she was leaving. She felt like she was carrying the summit with her. The river-flowing hill wasn't just a place. It was the trajectory of her own spirit, rising from the water and stone to touch the center of the day. Chapter 10. The Covenant of the Peak. Before moving downward, Elara looked back at the very highest point, a small spire of rock bleached white by the sun. She made a silent covenant with the air and the stone. She promised never to forget the perspective she had gained here. She promised that even when she was back in the humid, crowded valleys, she would keep a small, bright, silent summit inside her mind, where she could retreat whenever the world became too loud. The trumpet note finally vanished into the thermal winds, leaving behind a ringing in her ears that sounded like the earth itself spinning on its axis. She was Elara, and she was whole. The climb was over, but the mountain would never truly end. Chapter 11. The River Below. As she began the downward journey, her mind drifted back to the start, the river that gave this hill its name. It flowed relentlessly, oblivious to the peaks above it, yet shaped by the very stones that fell from these heights. She realized that she was like that river, shaped by the high places even when she moved through the lows. The symphony of river-flowing hill was finally complete, a bridge between the solid earth and the infinite sky. Chapter 12. Light of the Descent. The descent began under the watchful eye of the midday sun. Each step down was a return to the world of men. Yet Elara felt changed. The light that bathed the peaks now bathed her path. guiding her back toward the trees and the river. The world was vast, but she no longer felt small within it. She felt matched to its scale. Her spirit expanded to the width of the vistas she had witnessed. With a steady breath and a firm grip on her walking pole, she moved forward, a woman carrying the brilliance of the summit within her. She stands upon the jagged granite floor, above the world, where eagles softly glide. The vertical ascent is known no more, with nothing left for weary heart to hide. The mountain is a mirror in the light, reflecting back the woman she has grown. A solo trumpet sounds from dizzy height, a triumph in a kingdom made of stone. The river is a silver thread below, far from the noise and shadows of the wood. The sun provides a pure and golden glow, where heavy burdens once were understood. She carries down the summit in her soul, a silent peak within a crowded mind. The climb has finally made her spirit whole, leaving the fractured, fearful self behind.